Hi, and welcome to Danny After Dark. If you're new here, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a notification or a new episode. Tonight will be part 2 in my 2-part series on Katherine Knight. So if you missed part 1, go back and check it out so you're all caught up. Now, part 2, Katherine Knight. Let's go ahead and find out more. Let's go ahead and dive on in. Where we left off, Katherine had just left her relationship for a new man, John Price, she'd been having an ongoing affair with for the last several years. Well, who's John Price? He was a divorced father of 3 children when he met Katherine and when they started having an affair. His 2-year-old daughter had remained with his former wife, but the 2 older children had lived with him. John, he was well aware of Katherine's, dare I say, violent reputation. But that didn't stop anything. He had her move into his house in 1995. John's children, they liked Katherine, and he was making a lot of money working in the local mines. Everything was peaceful at first. That's what I mean, at first. 1998. Katherine and John had a fight over John's refusal to marry her. So Katherine responded by videotaping items that he had stolen from his work, and she sent the tape to his boss. Although technically the items were out-of-date medical kits that he had scavenged from the company trash, John was fired from the job. He had been there for 17 years. John was pissed, and he kicked Katherine out of the house that very same day, so she returned to her own home. But that didn't last long. A few months later, John and Katherine got back together. But now, he was adamant. He was refusing to allow her to move back in with him. Well, the fighting, it didn't end, and it became more and more frequent, to the point where most of John's friends wanted nothing anymore to do with him, as long as he was with Katherine. So what did John do? He chose Katherine. February 2000. After several assaults on John, Katherine stabbed him in the chest. John, he finally reached his breaking point, and he kicked Katherine out of the house. February 29th, 2000. John stopped at the magistrate court on his way to work, and he took out a restraining order against Katherine. This was to keep her away from him and to keep her away from his children. When he arrived at work that same day, he told his coworkers that if something happened and he didn't show up at work the following day, it would be because Katherine had killed him. Well, his coworkers were well aware of the situation. They didn't take this lightly. They pleaded with him not to go home. But he told them he believed she would kill his children if he didn't. So John, he went home. And when he arrived, he didn't find Katherine there. But he found that Katherine had sent his children away for a sleepover at a friend's house. So John spent that evening with his neighbors before finally deciding to go to bed at 11 o'clock p.m. Now, Katherine, she arrived at John's house later that night while he was sleeping, and somehow she got into the home. She sat down and watched TV for a few minutes. Then she had a shower. She then woke up John. They had sex. Afterward, she fell asleep. Now, the next morning, 6 o'clock a.m., John's neighbors, they became concerned when they saw John's car was still in the driveway. That was completely out of character for John. But that's not all. His coworkers became concerned when he didn't show up for work that morning. Again, completely out of character. But also, think about what he told them the day before. So John's boss sent a coworker over to his house to see if anything was wrong. So both the neighbor and John's coworker tried knocking on John's bedroom window to wake him. Well, there was no response. They then noticed blood on the front door, so they contacted the police, and the police arrived at 8 o'clock a.m. The police had to break down the back door to get into John's home. When they entered, they found John's body, but he wasn't alone. Katherine was there, but she was comatose from taking a large number of pills. Police noticed she had stabbed John with a butcher's knife while he was sleeping. According to the blood evidence, John awoke and he tried to turn the light on before attempting to escape. But Katherine chased him throughout the house. He had actually even managed to open the front door and he got outside of the house. But either he stumbled back inside or he was dragged back into the hallway where he finally died after bleeding out. Afterwards, Katherine, she went into Aberdeen and used his bank card and withdrew $1,000 cash from John's bank account through one of the ATMs. But she didn't stay out. She went back to John's home. Now, John's autopsy revealed that he had been stabbed at least 37 times in both the front and back of his body. Many of the stab wounds extended into vital organs. Several hours after John was dead, Katherine then skinned him and hung the skin from a meat hook on the frame of a door to the living room of the home. But it didn't stop there. Katherine then decapitated him and cooked parts of his body. She then put together the meat of his body with baked potato, pumpkin, zucchini, cabbage, yellow squash, and gravy in 2 settings at the dinner table, along with notes besides each plate. The notes, they had the name of each of John's children on it, the ones who lived there. She was planning to have those 2 children eat their father's body parts. There was a third meal, but it was thrown onto the back lawn. Police speculate that Katherine actually tried to eat this meal herself, but was unable to. Now, John's head, police found it in a pot with vegetables. The pot was still warm, and it was estimated to be at between 40 to 50 degrees Celsius. This led police to believe that the cooking had taken place early in the morning. Now, the police also noticed that sometime later, Katherine had arranged John's body. The left arm draped over an empty 1 2/4 liter soft drink bottle with his legs crossed. There's much speculation over why she arranged his body like that, but I won't get into that into this series. Now, Katherine also left a handwritten note on top of a photograph of John. It was blood-stained and covered with small pieces of his flesh. The note read, quote, "Time got you back, Jonathan, for raping my daughter. You to Beck, for Ross, for little John. Now play with little John's Dick John Price," end quote. It's worth noting there is no evidence that John had raped her daughter at all. Katherine claimed to police when she finally woke, she had no memory of any of this. She had initially been offered to plead guilty to manslaughter, but she rejected this. February 2nd, 2001, Katherine was arraigned on the charge of murdering John Price. She entered a plea of not guilty. But it didn't stop there. October 15th, 2001. The trial for Katherine Knight, well, it began. Justice Barry O'Keefe offered the 60 jury prospects the option of being excused due to the graphic nature of the photographic evidence. 5 jury prospects accepted this offer. Now, Katherine's attorneys then spoke to the judge, who adjourned to the following day. Everyone was surprised when the next morning, Katherine, she changed her plea to guilty. So the jury that they were trying to assemble was dismissed. Well, Justice O'Keefe then adjourned the trial, but to be sure, he ordered a psychiatric assessment overnight to determine Did Katherine really understand the consequences of a guilty plea? And he also wanted to make sure to determine that she was fit to make such a plea. Katherine's legal team, in preparing for a trial, was planning on defending her by claiming amnesia and disassociation. Well, Katherine, she still refused to accept responsibility for any of her actions. So it's actually really unclear why she even changed her plea to guilty. It just doesn't make sense. Well, at Katherine's sentencing hearing, her lawyers requested that she be excused to avoid hearing some of the facts. However, the judge completely refused this request. The judge also took the opinion of Dr. Timothy Lyons under consideration. When Dr. Timothy Lyons described the skinning and the decapitation of John, during this, Katherine, she became so hysterical that she actually had to be sedated. November 8th, 2001, Justice O'Keefe pointed out that the nature of the crime, and especially Katherine's lack of remorse, it required a severe penalty. He sentenced Katherine to life imprisonment, refusing to do a fixed non-parole period. He also ordered that her papers be marked, quote, never to be released, end quote. June 2006. Katherine, she tried to appeal the life sentence, claiming that a penalty of life in jail without the possibility of parole, it was too severe for the killing. Well, how do you think that went? Her appeal? It was dismissed. Justice McClellan wrote in his judgment, quote, this was an appalling crime, almost beyond contemplation in a civilized society, end quote. That is the case of Katherine. Now, thank you for sticking around for another episode of Danny After Dark. Do you have any questions or comments on this case or on Katherine Knight? Leave it down below. Let's be interactive. There were so many twists and turns of this case and of Katherine. So let's talk about it. And thank you again to Russell Hamill for the suggestion for this show. Now, do you have any recommendations for any episodes upcoming that you'd like me to cover? Leave it down below. You may see it featured in an upcoming episode. Until next time, remember, we don't live in darkness. Darkness lives in us.